The spring of 1943 represented a desperate, highly unstable equilibrium on the Eastern Front of World War II. Following the catastrophic encirclement and complete destruction of the German Sixth Army at the Battle of Stalingrad in February, the entire southern sector of the German front had collapsed into a chaotic, rapid retreat. Seizing what appeared to be a golden opportunity to permanently shatter the German war machine, Soviet Marshal Alexander Vasilevsky and the Red Army launched a massive, multi-front winter counteroffensive, pushing hundreds of kilometers westward to capture the industrial hub of Kharkov and driving deep toward the Dnieper river crossings. The Wehrmacht seemed to be on the brink of absolute strategic annihilation, with its frontline divisions severely depleted, its logistical infrastructure in ruins, and its communication lines severed. However, the German Southern Army Group was commanded by Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, arguably the most brilliant operational mind of the conflict. Recognizing that the overextended Soviet spearheads had outrun their supply columns and were suffering from acute logistical exhaustion, Manstein executed his famous tactical backhand blow in March 1943. By rapidly massing his remaining panzer divisions and striking the exposed, vulnerable flanks of the advancing Soviet columns, Manstein stabilized the front, recaptured Kharkov and Belgorod, and slaughtered over 80,000 Soviet soldiers. This extraordinary operational victory halted the Soviet advance and established a new, highly stabilized front line, but it also created a massive, bulging geographical anomaly in the center of the Eastern Front, the Kursk salient. This vast salient, projecting over 150 kilometers westward into the German lines, was centered around the city of Kursk and represented an enticing, highly strategic target for both the German and Soviet high commands. For the Germans, the salient represented a dangerous threat, as it split Army Group Center and Army Group South, while providing the Red Army with the perfect staging ground to launch future offensives that could cut off German communication lines to the west. However, it also presented a tempting offensive opportunity. If the Wehrmacht could launch a coordinated, two-pronged pincer movement from the north and south to cut off the neck of the salient, they could trap and destroy over 1 million Soviet soldiers, flatten the front line, and free up dozens of prime combat divisions for other sectors of the war. Manstein immediately recognized this strategic reality and advocated for a rapid, preemptive offensive, codenamed Operation Citadel, to be launched in late April or early May 1943. The strategic rationale for an early May offensive was built upon a cold, realistic assessment of Soviet and German recovery rates. Following the winter campaign, both armies were heavily battered and exhausted, but Manstein argued that the German Panzerwaffe, with its superior small unit leadership, rapid communication networks, and tactical coordination, could recover its offensive punch far more quickly than the massive, bureaucratic Red Army. In early May 1943, the Soviet defenses within the Kursk salient were still in an embryonic state. The complex, deeply echeloned belts of minefields, anti-tank ditches, and fortified gun nests that would historically blunt the German advance did not yet exist. The Soviet divisions inside the bulge were severely depleted, low on ammunition, and highly disorganized, while their tank reserves were still recovering from the Kharkov campaign. Manstein argued that a sudden, concentrated blow by the available panzer divisions, even without heavy reinforcements, would easily slice through the thin Soviet defensive lines, meeting behind Kursk within 48 hours to achieve a decisive, clean victory before the Soviet strategic reserve, the Steppe Front, could be mobilized or deployed. However, Manstein's strategic vision collided with the deep, paralyzing hesitation of the German high command and the obsessive, technology-focused micromanagement of Adolf Hitler. While Chief of the Army General Staff Kurt Zeitzler supported the offensive, the commander of the Ninth Army, Colonel General Walter Model, presented Hitler with disturbing aerial reconnaissance photographs showing that the Soviet defenses were starting to thicken. Model argued that his army was not strong enough to break through the northern sector of the salient and demanded substantial reinforcements, specifically the new heavy armor being manufactured in Germany. Hitler, who was increasingly fascinated by exotic, low-volume wonder weapons and terrified of another Stalingrad-style failure, seized upon Model's hesitation. He decided to postpone the offensive, initially to June and ultimately to July, to allow the German armaments industry to deliver the revolutionary Panzer V Panther tanks, the massive Panzer VI Tiger heavy tanks, and the heavy Ferdinand tank destroyers to the frontline units. This fateful decision to delay represented a catastrophic strategic error, as it voluntarily surrendered the single most valuable asset of mobile warfare, the element of surprise. During the prolonged two-month delay, the Soviet Stavka, under the direct leadership of Joseph Stalin, Marshal Georgy Zhukov, and Marshal Alexander Vasilevsky, fully anticipated the German plan. Having been warned of the German operational designs through high-level intelligence networks and frontline scouting, Zhukov made the brilliant, highly unconventional decision to adopt a deliberate defensive posture. Instead of launching their own preemptive summer offensive, the Soviets chose to let the Wehrmacht exhaust itself against a series of unprecedented, deeply layered defensive fortifications. Between May and July 1943, the Red Army transformed the Kursk salient into a virtual fortress, constructing 8 successive defensive belts that extended over 300 kilometers in depth. Over 300,000 civilian laborers were conscripted to dig thousands of kilometers of trenches, lay over 1 million landmines at a density of up to 3,000 mines per kilometer, and position thousands of anti-tank guns in specialized defensive nodes known as pack fronts. By postponing the offensive to July to wait for a handful of heavy tanks, Hitler allowed the Red Army to build the most formidable defensive obstacle in military history, turning what could have been a fluid, rapid victory in May into a bloody war of attrition that Germany could not possibly win. The historical stabilization of the Southern Front and the strategic planning surrounding Operation Citadel are documented in extensive military histories of the Eastern Front, which analyze the fateful debates between Hitler, Manstein, and the German General Staff during the spring of 1943. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/battle_of_Kursk. The operational significance of Manstein's backhand blow and the formation of the Kursk Bulge are explored in detailed studies of Wehrmacht and Red Army combat operations during the middle years of the war. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/3_battle_of_Kharkov. By examining these archival records, it becomes clear that the decision to delay Citadel to July was the defining strategic error of the 1943 campaign, transforming a highly viable operational opportunity in May into an insurmountable logistical and tactical disaster. The tactical debate that raged within the German High Command during the spring of 1943 represented a fundamental conflict between two opposing military philosophies: the pursuit of exotic, low-volume technological superiority versus the reliance on mature, highly reliable mass production. At the heart of this struggle was the fateful decision to postpone Operation Citadel in order to deploy the Wehrmacht's newest armored vehicles. Under the influence of Minister of Armaments Albert Speer and various industrial designers, Adolf Hitler had become convinced that the introduction of the Panzer V Panther, the Panzer VI Tiger heavy tank, and the heavy Ferdinand tank destroyer would easily shatter any Soviet defense, rendering traditional tactical maneuvers obsolete. However, this techno-federalist approach overlooked a terrifying logistical reality. These advanced vehicles were highly complex, and proven designs that had been pushed into production with virtually zero testing, making them prone to catastrophic mechanical breakdowns under combat conditions. The Panzer V Panther was the prime example of this rushed, immature engineering. Designed as the direct response to the Soviet T-34, the Panther featured excellent sloped armor and a high-velocity 75mm Kampfwagenkanonen 42 L71 gun. However, its drivetrain, transmission, and final drive units had been designed for a 30-ton vehicle but were forced to propel a tank that ultimately weighed 45 tons. This massive overload placed extreme stress on the final drives, which were manufactured from low-grade steel due to acute alloy shortages inside Germany, causing them to shear and fail after just a few hours of cross-country driving. Furthermore, the fuel pumps on early models were highly prone to leakage, allowing gasoline to pool in the bottom of the engine compartment, where it would instantly ignite when the engine overheated. During transit to the front line, several Panthers caught fire and were destroyed without ever seeing combat, a clear sign of the systemic design flaws that plagued this over-engineered machine. The Ferdinand tank destroyer, a 89-ton monster designed by Ferdinand Porsche utilizing Tiger prototype chassis, was equally flawed. Armed with the devastating 88mm Kampfwagenkanonen 43L71 gun, the Ferdinand possessed unmatched firepower and frontal armor of 200mm. However, its mechanical architecture was absurdly complex, utilizing an experimental gasoline-electric drive system that was prone to short circuits and failures. More critically, Porsche had completely omitted any secondary armament, leaving the Ferdinand with no organic machine gun to defend itself against close-quarters infantry attacks. During combat operations, once these heavy vehicles became isolated from friendly infantry, Soviet tank killer squads could easily crawl into their blind spots, disabling the tracks with satchel charges or placing magnetic mines on the engine deck. The Ferdinand was a slow, overweight, and mechanically fragile behemoth, designed for a static defensive role but forced into a rapid offensive breakthrough mission for which it was utterly unsuited. At the famous Munich conference in May 1943, General Inspector of the Panzer Troops Heinz Guderian issued a passionate, highly prophetic warning directly to Hitler. Guderian pointed out that the Panther was suffering from severe teething issues and would not be ready for combat for many months, warning that pushing them into battle prematurely would result in a massive mechanical disaster. He famously asked Hitler "Is it really necessary to attack Kursk this year? Does anyone even know where Kursk is? The world does not care if we hold Kursk or not." Guderian argued that the Wehrmacht should abandon the offensive entirely, preserving its precious armored reserves to build a powerful strategic defense in the west to face the impending Allied invasions. However, if the German High Command was absolutely committed to striking the Kursk bulge, Guderian and Manstein argued that they must do so immediately in May, utilizing the existing, highly reliable armored force rather than waiting for unstable heavy armor that existed only on paper. In this alternative May 1943 timeline, the Wehrmacht launches Operation Citadel with its battle-tested, mechanically mature, and standardized Panzer III and Panzer IV chassis, supported by the ubiquitous Sturmgeschütz III assault gun, better known as the StuG III. While these older vehicles lacked the thick armor of the Tiger or the long gun of the Panther, they possessed a critical tactical advantage that the heavy monsters lacked: absolute mechanical reliability. The Panzer IV, armed with the high-velocity 75mm Kampfwagenkanonen 40L48 gun, was a robust, highly dependable medium tank that could penetrate the frontal armor of the T-34 at standard combat ranges. Its crew was intimately familiar with its mechanical quirks, its spare parts were widely available in every division's logistical column, and its final drives could withstand hundreds of kilometers of high-speed cross-country maneuvers without a single failure. Alongside the Panzer IV, the StuG III assault gun represented the true backbone of the German armored force in 1943. Lacking a rotating turret, the StuG III was cheap to manufacture, possessed a very low profile that made it exceptionally easy to conceal, and was armed with the same high-velocity 75mm gun as the Panzer IV. Frontline infantry commanders praised the StuG III as the ultimate infantry support weapon, as its thick armor and rugged drivetrain allowed it to keep pace with the foot soldiers, systematically destroying Soviet anti-tank gun nests and bunkers under fire. By launching Operation Citadel in May 1943 with a force consisting primarily of Panzer IVs, Panzer IIIs, and StuG IIIs, the German panzer divisions would have possessed a level of operational readiness, tactical cohesion, and mechanical reliability that no historical German force could ever hope to achieve. The technical development and combat debut of the Panther tank at Kursk are analyzed in detail in engineering studies of late-war German armor, which document the catastrophic mechanical failures that plagued the first production models. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/panther_tank. The design flaws and operational record of the Ferdinand tank destroyer are preserved in Wehrmacht ordnance records and tactical reports on armored warfare. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Ferdinand_tank_destroyer. By examining these historical records, it becomes clear that the pursuit of exotic heavy armor was a major strategic mistake, and that a preemptive strike in May 1943 utilizing reliable, mass-produced medium armor represented Germany's best possible tactical option to secure a decisive victory on the Eastern Front. In early May 1943, under the clear, dry skies of the late Russian spring, the Wehrmacht launched Operation Citadel. Across a front stretching over 200 kilometers, a massive force of over 800,000 German soldiers, supported by 3,000 tanks and assault guns, surged forward to crush the Kursk salient. Unlike the historical July offensive, which collided with a virtual fortress, the German pincers in May struck a Soviet defense that was still under construction, disorganized, and deeply vulnerable. In the northern sector of the salient, the 9th Army, commanded by Colonel General Walter Model, spearheaded the assault against the Soviet Central Front under the command of General Konstantin Rokossovsky. Historically, Model's northern offensive had ground to a bloody, static halt within 48 hours, unable to break through the heavily fortified ridges of Alkovatka and the industrial railway station of Panayrai. In May, however, these defensive strongpoints were only partially dug and lacked their heavy anti-tank gun allocations. The tactical execution of the 9th Army's May offensive was a masterclass in coordinated, high-speed armored warfare. Rather than throwing slow, heavy Tiger tanks into dense minefields, Model deployed highly flexible Panzerkeil, or armored wedge, formations consisting of Panzer IV medium tanks and StuG III assault guns, flanked by Panzer III light tanks that acted as reconnaissance screens. The German engineers, or pioneer units, cleared the sparse Soviet minefields with rapid speed, allowing the armored spearheads to bypass the embryonic Soviet strongpoints. Within 24 hours of the opening bombardment, the German 20th and 2nd Panzer Divisions had breached the 1st Soviet defensive belt, pushing deep into Rokossovsky's tactical rear. The Soviet infantry divisions, low on ammunition and lacking deep trench networks to shield them from artillery, collapsed under the sudden, fluid German advance. By flanking Alkovatka from the west, Model's panzers maintained their operational momentum, driving rapidly southward toward the city of Kursk. Meanwhile, in the southern sector of the salient, the 4th Panzer Army, commanded by General Hermann Hoth, and Army Detachment Kempf, led by General Werner Kempf, launched a powerful, coordinated assault against the Soviet Voronezh front under the command of General Nikolai Vatutin. In the historical July offensive, Hoth's forces had suffered devastating casualties to deep, dense Soviet minefields and highly integrated anti-tank gun nets, which slowed their advance and forced them into a bloody, exhausting attrition battle near Prokhorovka. In May, these obstacles did not exist. The rolling plains north of Belgorod were wide open, allowing the veteran elite divisions of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps, including the Leibstandard, Das Reich, and Totenkopf, to execute rapid, high-speed flanking maneuvers. Vatutin's outer defensive lines, consisting of raw conscripts with virtually no heavy anti-tank mines to protect them, were instantly overrun by the fast-moving German armored columns. The tactical cohesion of the southern pincer was maintained through the highly efficient deployment of the StuG III assault gun battalions. Operating as mobile, organic artillery support, these low-profile assault guns advanced in direct lockstep with the Panzer IV medium tanks, using their high-velocity 75mm guns to systematically destroy Soviet anti-tank gun nests and infantry bunkers before they could engage the main armored wedge. Because these vehicles shared identical mechanical parts and engines with the Panzer III chassis, the division's maintenance units were able to repair battle damage in the field with unprecedented speed, keeping over 90% of the German tanks active and operational. By bypassing the urban center of Aboyan and driving directly toward the northeast, Hoth's armored division secured a decisive operational breakthrough, slicing through the Soviet 2nd Tank Army and advancing rapidly toward a link-up with Model's northern forces. The dramatic difference in the speed and success of the May offensive compared to the historical July campaign is analyzed in military histories of the Eastern Front, which demonstrate how the absence of deep defensive belts allowed the Wehrmacht to execute its traditional doctrine of rapid, fluid mobile warfare. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/battle_of_Kursk The tactical effectiveness of the Panzer formations utilizing Panzer IVs and StuG IIIs is documented in frontline reports on armored operations in Russia, which highlight the critical importance of mechanical reliability and speed in operational breakthroughs. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/sturmgesch%c3%bctz_3. By striking in May, the Wehrmacht avoided the static, grinding attrition that historically destroyed its armored reserves, exploiting a critical window of opportunity to restore its operational supremacy in the east. By mid-May 1943, the rapid, synchronized advance of the northern and southern German pincers had created a critical operational crisis for the Red Army inside the Kursk salient. Bypassing major cities and fortified positions, the fast-moving armored divisions maintained their high-speed momentum, leaving the disorganized Soviet infantry divisions stranded in their wake. On the 9th day of the offensive, the lead elements of the 7th Panzer Division from Model's 9th Army, driving southward, and the 11th Panzer Division from Hoff's 4th Panzer Army, driving northward, linked up east of the city of Kursk. This historic meeting completed a massive, watertight encirclement, trapping the entire Soviet Central Front and Voronezh Front inside a colossal pocket that extended over 100 kilometers in width. Over 1 million Soviet soldiers, along with 3,000 tanks, 10,000 artillery pieces, and thousands of supply trucks, were instantly severed from their communication and logistical lines to the east. The complete encirclement of the two Soviet fronts provoked immediate, widespread panic within the Soviet High Command in Moscow. Joseph Stalin, refusing to accept the catastrophic collapse of his defensive lines, issued a series of desperate, highly unrealistic orders, demanding that the trapped armies launch immediate, coordinated breakout attempts in every direction. At the same time, Stalin ordered the Red Army's ultimate strategic reserve, the Steppe Front under the command of Marshal Ivan Konev, to immediately abandon its staging areas east of the Don River and rush westward to smash the German outer ring. However, because this massive reserve force was thrown into battle in a rushed, piecemeal fashion without proper reconnaissance, air support, or logistical preparation, its tank brigades were forced to advance in long, vulnerable columns along dusty roads, where they became perfect targets for the Luftwaffe's Junkers 87 Stuka dive bombers and Henschel 129 ground attack aircraft. As the divisions of the Steppe Front slammed into the German outer ring, they encountered a formidable, highly flexible defensive system. Rather than getting drawn into a static battle, the German commanders deployed their mobile divisions in elastic defensive screens, utilizing the low-profile StuG III assault guns and high-velocity 75mm anti-tank guns to establish devastating ambush zones. When Konev's tank brigades launched massive, uncoordinated head-on attacks, they were systematically funneled into these pre-prepared kill zones, where they were slaughtered from distance by German gunners. At the same time, the veteran German panzer regiments, operating under highly experienced small unit commanders, executed rapid flanking counterattacks, cutting off the Soviet spearheads and destroying them in detail. By late May 1943, the Steppe Front's offensive power had been completely broken, and the trapped Soviet armies inside the Kursk pocket, starved of ammunition, fuel, and clean water, began to collapse and surrender in massive numbers. The systematic clearance of the Kursk pocket represented a strategic victory of unparalleled magnitude, comparable to the great encirclements of Kiev and Vyazma in the summer of 1941. Over 500,000 Soviet prisoners were captured, along with thousands of heavy weapons and intact tank assets that were immediately salvaged and adapted for Wehrmacht use. This crushing blow shattered the offensive capacity of the Red Army for the remainder of 1943, leaving the Soviet Union with a critical shortage of experienced manpower and armor. For the Wehrmacht, the success of Operation Citadel in May stabilized the Eastern Front, flattened the dangerous Kursk bulge, and shortened the front line by over 300 kilometers, allowing the German High Command to establish a powerful, centralized strategic reserve that could be deployed to face future threats in Italy and Western Europe. The operational encirclement and destruction of the Soviet forces at Kursk are analyzed in detail in strategic assessments of World War II, which demonstrate how the rapid link-up of German armored pincers could have achieved a decisive, historic victory if launched before the Soviet defenses were fully constructed. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/battle_of_Kursk. The critical role of the steppe front's premature deployment and its subsequent tactical defeat are recorded in historical studies of Red Army Reserve operations during the Middle War years. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/steppe_front. By examining these historical realities, it becomes clear that a May offensive represented the ultimate tactical pivot, allowing the Wehrmacht to leverage its superior mobile warfare doctrine to inflict a catastrophic, war-altering defeat on the Soviet Union. The ultimate historical assessment of a German strategic victory at the Battle of Kursk in May 1943 must look beyond the immediate operational success to evaluate its long-term strategic, economic, and geopolitical impact on the global conflict. While the rapid encirclement and total destruction of the Soviet Central and Voronezh fronts would have undoubtedly bought the Wehrmacht precious time, stabilized the Eastern Front, and prevented the Red Army from launching its historic summer counteroffensives, it would have ultimately collided with the insurmountable, brutal macroeconomic realities of a multi-front total war. By mid-1943, the combined industrial output, raw material reserves, and demographic capacity of the Allied coalition, comprising the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union, completely dwarfed the German war economy, rendering any localized Wehrmacht tactical victory incapable of altering the final outcome of the war. The primary and most decisive strategic bottleneck that a German victory at Kursk could not resolve was the acute, permanent shortage of fuel. The German war machine was critically dependent on synthetic oil plants inside the Reich and the oil fields of Ploesti in Romania to sustain its motorized divisions, aviation operations, and maritime fleets. As the Allied strategic bombing campaign intensified in late 1943 and 1944, these vital synthetic oil refineries and transportation networks were systematically targeted and obliterated by thousands of Allied heavy bombers. A highly reliable, battle-tested Panzer IV medium tank or StuG III assault gun was no more effective than a broken-down heavy tank if it sat completely immobilized in a field workshop due to a total lack of gasoline. Historically, entire armored divisions were forced to abandon and blow up their own perfectly operational vehicles during the retreat across Ukraine and Poland because the logistical columns had simply run out of fuel. Furthermore, a victory at Kursk would have done nothing to halt the opening of the secondary and tertiary fronts in Europe, which systematically drained the Wehrmacht's remaining strategic reserves. In July 1943, the Western Allies launched Operation Husky, invading Sicily and forcing the collapse of the Italian fascist regime under Benito Mussolini. This operational shock forced Hitler to immediately halt offensive operations in the east and divert several elite panzer divisions, including those that fought at Kursk, to secure the Italian front and prevent an Allied advance into southern Europe. By 1944, the impending Allied invasion of northern France, codenamed Operation Overlord, required Germany to maintain over 50 high-quality divisions in the west, starved of fuel and air support, leaving the Eastern Front permanently vulnerable to subsequent Soviet offensives. No tactical success at Kursk could have prevented the massive, dual-front pressure that squeezed the Reich between the industrial hammers of the West and the East. Logistically, the Soviet Union's capacity to absorb immense manpower and material losses was supported by the staggering scale of American Lend-Lease aid, which was just reaching its peak in late 1943. While the Wehrmacht struggled to manufacture a few thousand trucks, the United States shipped over 400,000 high-quality Studebaker trucks, thousands of steam locomotives, millions of tons of steel, aviation fuel, and high-protein food directly to the Soviet Union. This massive logistical injection mobilized the Red Army, allowing it to transport whole armies across vast distances with rapid speed, while the German logistical columns remained critically dependent on horse-drawn carriages and vulnerable rail lines. Even if the Soviets lost over 1 million soldiers at Kursk in May, Their vast demographic reserves, combined with American trucks and industrial machinery, would have allowed the Red Army to rebuild its divisions and launch devastating winter offensives by early 1944. In conclusion, the preemptive execution of Operation Citadel in May 1943 represents the single greatest missed tactical opportunity of the German Panzerwaffe on the Eastern Front. By launching the offensive with highly reliable, mature Panzer IV and StuG III units before the Soviet defensive belts were constructed, Germany could have achieved a decisive, historic victory that would have shattered the Red Army's immediate offensive power and rewritten the operational timeline of the war. However, this tactical masterpiece would have ultimately led to a strategic dead end. In the arena of total war, individual military victories, no matter how brilliant, coordinated, or decisive, are ultimately subservient to the unyielding, crushing laws of global industrial mobilization, resource allocation, and macroeconomic scale. The macroeconomic limitations of the German war economy and the overwhelming impact of American Lend-Lease aid to the Soviet Union are analyzed in detail in Economic Histories of the Eastern Front, which demonstrate how logistics and industrial scale ultimately decided the conflict. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/lend-lease. The strategic impact of the Allied multi-front pressure and the synthetic oil campaign are documented in historical studies of World War II aviation and grand strategy. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/strategic_bombing_during_world_war_2. By evaluating the Kursk campaign within this comprehensive global framework, we gain a realistic, balanced understanding of both its immense tactical potential and its ultimate strategic limitations in the face of global attritional warfare.